The powerful Medici family, you might know them for their art, their wealth, their banking empire that stretched across Europe. But what if I told you that their influence reached far beyond the marble palaces of Florence, straight into the holiest of places, the very heart of the Vatican? What if I told you they pulled strings, whispered secrets, and even bought votes to install their allies and their own family members on the most powerful throne in Christendom, the papacy itself? Prepare to dive into a world of hidden deals, ancient rivalries, and shocking power plays, because the Medici didn't just meddle in papal elections once or twice, they did it 7 times, and each time the world shifted. Number 1, Pope Innocent VIII, 1484. The year was 1484. Florence hummed under the subtle, yet absolute rule of Lorenzo de Medici, a man known to history as Lorenzo the Magnificent. He was not a duke, nor a king, but his sway over the city-state was undeniable. His wealth, built on banking and trade, was immense. His influence, extending through alliances and patronage, stretched across Italy. But there was a constant simmering tension with the Papal States, particularly after the deadly Pazzi conspiracy just 6 years prior. Pope Sixtus IV, who many believed had been complicit in that bloody plot to assassinate Lorenzo and his brother Giuliano, had finally passed away. The air in Rome was thick with anticipation. A new pope meant a new alignment of power, a new chapter in the complex, often dangerous, game of Italian politics. Lorenzo knew this was a critical moment. He needed a pope who would be friendly to Florentine interests, a pope who would not harbor grudges against the Medici, and ideally, a pope who could be influenced. He had learned his lessons from Sixtus IV's hostility. This time, he would take no chances. The selection of the next pontiff would not be left to fate, nor entirely to divine inspiration. It would be a matter of careful, calculated strategy. In Rome, the College of Cardinals prepared for the conclave, the secret assembly where they would elect the new pope. There were many factions, each with their own powerful patrons and their own agendas. There were cardinals loyal to King Ferdinand of Naples, cardinals who looked to the rising power of France, and cardinals who simply sought their own advancement. Amidst this complex web, Lorenzo de Medici quietly yet effectively began to weave his own threads. He dispatched his most trusted agents to Rome. These were not simply messengers. They were experienced diplomats, savvy negotiators, and men well versed in the art of persuasion. Their mission was clear: identify a suitable candidate, a cardinal who, while perhaps not a Medici himself, would be amenable to Medici influence. And then they were to secure his election, whatever the cost. One cardinal who caught Lorenzo's eye was Giovanni Battista Cibo. He was a Genoese cardinal known for his somewhat easygoing nature and his lack of strong political alliances. He was not a grand intellectual or a formidable theologian, but he was perceived as pliable, someone who could be guided. Crucially, he was not overtly hostile to the Medici. This made him an ideal choice for Lorenzo's purposes. Lorenzo's agents set to work. They moved through the labyrinthine corridors of Rome, meeting with cardinals in hushed tones, offering assurances and making promises. The Medici wealth, legendary even then, became a potent tool. While outright bribes were technically forbidden during conclaves, the reality was often different. Gifts were exchanged, debts were settled, and promises of future preferments, lucrative bishoprics, cardinalates for family members, political favors, were whispered into receptive ears. The conclave began, a period of intense negotiation and strategic voting within the locked-down Sistine Chapel. The cardinals, confined to their cells, deliberated under strict rules, but outside, the machinations continued. Lorenzo's agents worked tirelessly, feeding information to their allies inside and coordinating efforts to sway wavering votes. They highlighted Cibo's perceived virtues, his moderation, and his potential for fostering peace within Italy. They also subtly underscored the dangers of electing a candidate too closely tied to rival powers, or one who might reignite old feuds. The process was long and arduous. Votes shifted, deals were made and broken. But through it all, the quiet, persistent pressure from the Medici network continued. Eventually, the efforts bore fruit. Giovanni Battista Cibo emerged from the conclave as the newly elected pontiff, taking the name Innocent VIII. The white smoke rising from the Sistine Chapel signaled not just a new pope, but a significant diplomatic triumph for Lorenzo the Magnificent. The immediate aftermath confirmed Lorenzo's foresight. Innocent VIII, true to his character, proved to be a pope who valued peace and stability, and who was receptive to the counsel of the powerful Florentine banker. The most telling sign of this newfound alliance came in the form of a marriage. Lorenzo's daughter, Maddalena de Medici, was betrothed to Francesco Cibo, the illegitimate son of the new Pope Innocent VIII. This union was more than a family affair. It was a powerful political statement intertwining the fortunes of the Medici with the highest office in the church. This marriage brought the Medici immense prestige and direct access to the papal court. Lorenzo became the de facto ambassador of Florence to Rome, consulted on matters of state and even on appointments within the church. He used this influence to secure cardinalates for his own family members, laying the groundwork for even greater Medici involvement in the papacy in the future. His young son Giovanni was already on a path to the cardinalate at an astonishingly young age, thanks in large part to this close relationship. The election of Innocent VIII, orchestrated with such precision by Lorenzo the Magnificent, was a pivotal moment. It demonstrated the Medici's understanding that true power in Italy extended beyond Florence. It needed a strong hand in Rome, a friendly face on the papal throne. The success of this endeavor cemented Lorenzo's reputation as a master strategist and established a precedent for Medici involvement in papal elections that would resonate for decades to come, leading to even more direct and audacious acts of meddling. The stage was set for the family's greatest triumphs and their deepest entanglements with the Holy See. Number 2, Pope Leo X, 1513. The year 1513 marked a seismic shift in the history of the Medici family and the papacy. It was the moment a Medici, born and bred in the opulent palaces of Florence, ascended to the very pinnacle of the Catholic Church. This was not merely about influencing an election. This was about placing a direct member of the family, Lorenzo the Magnificent's own son, Giovanni, on the throne of St. Peter. The stage for this incredible achievement had been set decades earlier by Lorenzo himself. Through his shrewd diplomacy and lavish patronage, particularly during the pontificate of Innocent VIII, he had meticulously paved the way for his children's future. His son, Giovanni, destined for the church from a young age, had received a cardinal's hat at the astonishing age of 13. This was an unprecedented act, a clear sign of the immense power and influence the Medici had cultivated. But the road to the papacy was not simple. After the death of Lorenzo the Magnificent, the Medici faced a period of exile from Florence, as the city briefly embraced a more republican form of government under the influence of Girolamo Savonarola. Giovanni de Medici, then a cardinal, shared in this exile, a period that refined his political instincts and hardened his resolve. He learned patience, cultivated a vast network of allies, and continued to accumulate wealth. By 1512, the Medici had returned to Florence, largely thanks to papal and Spanish support. Giovanni, now a seasoned cardinal, was once again a dominant figure in Florentine politics. When Pope Julius II, the formidable warrior pope, died in February 1513, the opportunity Giovanni had been waiting for finally arrived. The College of Cardinals assembled for the conclave in the Sistine Chapel. The atmosphere was charged. And Julius II had been a dynamic, military-minded pontiff, and his successor would face enormous challenges: the rising Protestant movement in Germany, the ongoing power struggles between France and Spain for control of Italy, and the need for significant church reform. Giovanni de Medici was a leading candidate. At 37 years old, he was remarkably young for a papabile, a cardinal considered suitable for the papacy. He suffered from a painful fistula, a recurring ailment that many cardinals believed would lead to a short pontificate. This, ironically, worked in his favor. Older cardinals, eager for their own turn on the papal throne, might have seen him as a temporary placeholder, someone who would keep the seat warm until their own time arrived. This perception of his fragility made him a palatable compromise candidate to various factions. But Giovanni's real strengths were his extraordinary charm, his refined intellect, and his immense wealth. He was known for his love of the arts, his wit, and his generous spirit. He understood the nuances of power and how to play the long game. His family's banking network, unrivaled in Europe, was an invaluable asset. While not directly bribing cardinals with sacks of gold inside the conclave, the Medici's financial muscle meant they could make promises of future favors, lucrative appointments, and financial support that few other families could match. Inside the conclave, Giovanni and his allies worked tirelessly. His cousin, Giulio de Medici, a cardinal in his own right and a future pope, was a crucial part of his team, negotiating and subtly influencing other cardinals. The Medici faction presented Giovanni as a man of peace, a scholar, and a patron of the arts, someone who could bring a new era of stability and cultural flourishing after the martial reign of Julius II. They downplayed his relative youth and health issues, framing them as minor inconveniences. The negotiations were intense. Cardinals haggled over votes, formed temporary alliances, and tested the resolve of their rivals. Meals were served, often lavishly, within the confines of the conclave, and political discussions often continued over plates of fine food and wine. Giovanni himself was known for his engaging conversations, disarming opponents with his agreeable manner. After a relatively swift conclave, lasting just 7 days, the smoke rose. On March 11, 1513, Giovanni de Medici was elected pope. He chose the name Leo X. The election sent shockwaves across Europe. For the first time, a son of Lorenzo the Magnificent, a direct representative of the Florentine banking dynasty, sat on the chair of St. Peter. The Medici had achieved their ultimate ambition. Their family, once humble merchants, now controlled not only the political and economic heart of Florence, but also the spiritual and political capital of the entire Catholic world. Rome blossomed under Leo X's reign. He was a prodigious patron of the arts, commissioning masterpieces from Raphael and funding the rebuilding of St. Peter's Basilica, a project that would ultimately contribute to the Protestant Reformation. His papacy was characterized by a lavish court, grand spectacles, and an unprecedented focus on cultural achievements. He appointed numerous Medici family members and their allies to key positions, solidifying the family's grip on both secular and ecclesiastical power. His brother Giuliano and his cousin Giulio were granted important roles, ensuring Medici interests were always at the forefront. Leo X's election was a testament to the long-term planning and relentless ambition of the Medici. It showed how wealth, strategic alliances, and a deep understanding of political maneuvering could elevate a family to unimaginable heights. It was the apotheosis of Medici meddling, a direct placement of their own bloodline on the most powerful throne in Europe. This success, however, would also set the stage for even greater challenges and controversies, as the demands of the papacy clashed with the desires of the ruling family of Florence. Number 3, Pope Clement VII, 1523. The year 1523 presented a critical challenge for the Medici family. Just 10 years after the triumph of Leo X's election, the Papal States found themselves in a precarious position. The Protestant Reformation, sparked by Martin Luther, was gaining dangerous momentum across Europe. The Holy Roman Empire, under the young and ambitious Charles V, was asserting its dominance, clashing fiercely with King Francis I of France for control of Italy. And the papacy, burdened by massive debts left by the lavish reign of Leo X, was caught in the middle of these titanic struggles. When Leo X died unexpectedly in December 1521, the College of Cardinals elected Adrian VI, a devout and austere Dutchman, as a compromise candidate. His brief papacy, focused on much-needed reforms and austerity, was unpopular with many cardinals who preferred the Roman lifestyle. When Adrian VI died in September 1523, the stage was set for another intense conclave. For the Medici, the stakes were incredibly high. They had tasted the ultimate power with Leo X, and they were determined to retain it. Their primary candidate was Cardinal Giulio de Medici, Leo X's illegitimate but later legitimized cousin. Giulio was a man of considerable experience, having served as Leo X's most trusted advisor. He was skilled in administration, diplomacy, and finance, a stark contrast to the more free-spending Leo X. He understood the intricacies of papal politics better than almost anyone. The conclave that followed was one of the longest and most arduous in papal history, dragging on for nearly 2 months. The heat in Rome during the autumn months was oppressive, and conditions inside the confined Sistine Chapel were miserable. Disease was a constant threat. The cardinals were deeply divided, largely along the lines of the imperial pro-Charles V and French pro-Francis I factions. Each side sought to install a pope sympathetic to their respective monarch. Cardinal Giulio de Medici found himself in the unenviable position of trying to navigate these powerful opposing forces. He could not openly favor one king over the other, as this would alienate a significant block of cardinals. His strategy was to present himself as a neutral, capable administrator, a unifier who could heal the divisions within the church and bring stability to Italy. His powerful Medici network, though perhaps not as financially dominant as it had been under Lorenzo the Magnificent, was still formidable. Agents of the Medici family were active outside the conclave, gathering intelligence, spreading rumors, and making promises to secure votes. Inside, Giulio relied on his own diplomatic skills and the loyalty of cardinals who had benefited from Medici patronage under Leo X. The negotiations were brutal. Votes were cast, alliances were formed, and then swiftly dissolved. The cardinals, who initially supported Giulio, would switch their allegiance, only to return to him days later. Bribery, while not overt, was present in the form of promises of future appointments, benefices, and influence. Giulio himself was known for his cunning and his ability to read the political currents within the college. He knew which cardinals were amenable to flattery, which responded to appeals to their loyalty, and which could be swayed by the prospect of personal gain. At one point, the deadlock seemed the cardinals grew weary, sick, and desperate to conclude the election. Food supplies dwindled. The pressure from outside Rome, from the emperor and the French king, intensified. Giulio de Medici patiently waited, allowing other candidates to exhaust their support, while he played a masterful game of attrition, positioning himself as the only viable compromise. Finally, after 50 days of intense deliberation, on November 19, 1523, Cardinal Giulio de Medici was elected pope. He chose the name Clement VII. It was another monumental triumph for the Medici family. For the second time in a row, a Medici sat on the papal throne, a testament to their enduring power, their strategic acumen, and their deep-seated ambition. Clement VII's papacy, however, proved to be one of the most disastrous in church history. He inherited a world in turmoil and struggled to navigate the treacherous waters of European politics. His attempts to play Charles V and Francis I against each other backfired spectacularly. In 1527, his indecision and political miscalculations led to the horrific sack of Rome by imperial troops, an event that devastated the Eternal City and profoundly humiliated the papacy. Clement himself was forced to flee the Vatican and take refuge in the Castel Sant'Angelo. Despite the calamities that befell his pontificate, Clement VII's election itself stands as a powerful example of Medici meddling. It demonstrated their ability to secure the highest office even in the face of intense international rivalry and internal church divisions. His rise was a direct result of the long-term strategies laid down by Lorenzo the Magnificent and the continued influence of the Medici family's wealth, diplomatic skill, and network of alliances. It showcased their relentless drive to maintain their hold on power, not just in Florence, but at the very heart of Christendom. And while his reign brought immense challenges, his election secured, for a time, the continuation of the Medici dynasty at the pinnacle of European power. Number 4, Pope Paul III, 1534. The year 1534 was a period of fragile peace and shifting alliances in Italy following the devastating sack of Rome in 1527. Florence, once again under Medici rule, was now solidified as a duchy, with Alessandro de Medici installed as its first duke, largely thanks to the support of Emperor Charles V. Pope Clement VII, the Medici pontiff who had endured the trauma of the sack, had recently died, leaving behind a complex legacy of political entanglements and unfinished business. For the Medici, the death of Clement VII presented both an opportunity and a challenge. While they had secured the Duchy of Florence, their influence in Rome, though still significant, was no longer guaranteed by a direct Medici pope. They needed to ensure that the next pontiff would be sympathetic to their interests, particularly regarding their new ducal status in Florence, and would not seek to undermine their authority. The Medici had strong ties to the Farnese family, a powerful Roman noble house. Cardinal Alessandro Farnese, a seasoned politician and long-serving cardinal, was a prominent candidate. The College of Cardinals gathered for the conclave in October 1534. The atmosphere was different from the previous lengthy and contentious elections. The cardinals, chastened by the recent turmoil and the looming threat of the Protestant Reformation, sought a strong, stable leader. Many were weary of the endless wars and political maneuvering that had plagued Clement VII's reign. They desired a pope who could unite the church, perhaps even call a general council to address the growing religious schism. Alessandro de Medici, the Duke of Florence, understood the political landscape. He sent his agents to Rome, not to directly campaign for a Medici family member, as there were no suitable primary candidates among the Florentine Medici at this time, but to influence the outcome in favor of a papabile who would be beneficial to the duchy. Their aim was to ensure that the new pope would respect and consolidate the Medici's position in Florence, and potentially elevate their allies and distant relatives to key positions within the church. Cardinal Alessandro Farnese was an intriguing figure. He was a veteran cardinal, having been appointed by Pope Alexander VI of Borgia way back in 1493. He was known for his shrewdness, his love of luxury, and his impressive intellect. He had also accumulated considerable wealth and influence through his long career and powerful family connections. Crucially, he was a pragmatic politician willing to adapt to changing circumstances. His advanced age, he was 66, considered old for the time, also made him attractive to some cardinals who might have hoped for a shorter pontificate followed by their own opportunity. The Medici agents in Rome, under the guidance of Duke Alessandro, would have emphasized Farnese's qualities as a unifying figure. They would have highlighted his experience and his potential to bring stability to the church. They would have subtly reminded other cardinals of the benefits of aligning with the powerful Medici family, who could offer significant financial and political support. The negotiations would have taken place behind closed doors, promises exchanged, and alliances forged. The specific requests from the Medici might have included ensuring the continued support for their rule in Florence, and perhaps securing cardinalates for their distant relatives or strong allies. For example, Niccolo Ridolfi, a relative of the Medici through his mother Contessina de Medici, Lorenzo the Magnificent's sister, was already a cardinal and a strong Farnese ally, further cementing this connection. The conclave was remarkably swift, lasting only 2 days. This speed suggested a significant degree of pre-conclave maneuvering and consensus building. Cardinal Alessandro Farnese was elected pope on October 13, 1534, taking the name Paul III. His election was largely seen as a victory for the traditional Italian cardinals, and for those who sought a strong, decisive leader to guide the church through its turbulent times. For the Medici, Paul III's election was a favorable outcome. While not a direct Medici, he was a pope with whom they had established strong ties. Paul III quickly demonstrated his willingness to work with the Medici. He respected their ducal status in Florence and did not challenge their authority. In fact, he solidified their position by marrying his own granddaughter, Ottavia Farnese, to Charles V's illegitimate son, Ottavio Farnese, and later marrying another of his granddaughters, Vittoria Farnese, to Guido Sforza di Santa Fiora, a move that pleased the emperor and indirectly benefited the Medici by stabilizing the political climate in Italy. Well, Paul III was also instrumental in promoting members of the Medici family within the church. He later elevated Alessandro de' Medici's own son, Giovanni Battista de' Medici, though technically illegitimate and not from Alessandro's ducal line, to a cardinalate, albeit posthumously for Alessandro. More importantly, he maintained a good relationship with Duke Alessandro, providing stability for the newly established Duchy of Florence. Perhaps most significantly, Paul III took the bold step of calling the Council of Trent, which would be crucial for the Counter-Reformation. While the Medici did not directly influence this decision, having a sympathetic pope who was focused on strengthening the church was ultimately beneficial for their own stability and their role as powerful Catholic rulers in Italy. The election of Paul III showcases a different facet of Medici meddling. It wasn't about placing a direct family member on the papal throne, but about skillfully navigating the complex political landscape to ensure the election of a pope who would support their family's growing power and legitimacy as rulers of Florence. It demonstrated their continued ability to exert influence at the highest levels of the church, even when the immediate benefits were more indirect, solidifying their position as an indispensable power in the heart of Italy. Number 5. Pope Clement VIII, 1592. The late 16th century saw Europe still reeling from the aftermath of the Protestant Reformation and deeply entangled in religious wars. Spain under King Philip II was arguably the dominant power, often attempting to dictate papal elections to ensure a pontiff sympathetic to its vast global empire. France, meanwhile, was struggling with its own internal wars of religion. Florence, now the Grand Duchy of Tuscany, was led by Ferdinando I de' Medici, a remarkably shrewd and capable ruler who had once been a cardinal himself before renouncing his red hat to assume the Grand Ducal throne. When Pope Innocent IX died in December 1591, after a very short pontificate, the College of Cardinals prepared for another conclave. This election was particularly crucial. Spain was pushing hard for one of its favored candidates, but many Italian cardinals, including Ferdinando I, were wary of such overt Spanish control over the papacy. They desired a more independent and balanced pontiff who would not simply serve the interests of one foreign power. Ferdinando I de' Medici, a former cardinal and now Grand Duke, possessed an unparalleled understanding of papal politics. He knew the personalities within the College of Cardinals, their rivalries, their ambitions, and their weaknesses. He deployed his vast network of agents and his considerable wealth to influence the election. His primary goal was to prevent the election of a staunchly pro-Spanish pope and to promote a candidate who would be favorable to the Italian states, particularly Florence, and who could act as a mediator in the ongoing European conflicts. His preferred candidate was Cardinal Ippolito Aldobrandini. Aldobrandini was a respected jurist and diplomat, known for his integrity, his moderation, and his deep piety. He had served as a papal legate in Poland and had a reputation for being incorruptible, a quality that appealed to many who were tired of the political maneuvering and blatant simony that sometimes plagued papal elections. Crucially, he was not seen as beholden to any single foreign power. The conclave of 1592 was one of the longest and most difficult of the late 16th century, lasting for almost 2 months. The cardinals were deeply divided, with the Spanish faction, often referred to as the creatures of Spain, actively campaigning for their candidates, while the Italian factions, often supported by France and the Medici, resisted. The atmosphere inside the conclave was tense, filled with fervent debates, strategic delays, and a constant shifting of allegiances. Ferdinando I de' Medici's agents worked tirelessly outside the conclave walls. They communicated with cardinals inside through secret channels, passing messages and coordinating strategies. They appealed to the Italian cardinals' sense of national pride, urging them to elect a pope who would prioritize Italian interests over those of Spain. They highlighted Aldobrandini's virtues, presenting him as a strong leader who could navigate the complex religious and political challenges of the era. The Medici financial resources were undoubtedly used to sweeten deals, though the specific nature of these transactions was carefully hidden. Promises of future cardinalates, benefices, and papal patronage were powerful tools of persuasion. The Spanish faction, led by Cardinal Mendoza, fought fiercely. They presented counter-candidates and tried to form a blocking minority, but Ferdinando's influence was undeniable. He had built up a reputation as a cunning and reliable ally. His personal relationships with many cardinals, forged during his own time in the church, proved invaluable. Wavering cardinals that Aldobrandini was the best choice for the stability and independence of the papacy. After weeks of deadlock and intense negotiations, the tide slowly turned in Aldobrandini's favor. Many cardinals became exhausted by the prolonged stalemate and began to seek a compromise candidate who could unite the college. Aldobrandini, with his reputation for impartiality and his solid credentials, fit the bill perfectly. On January 30th, 1592, Ippolito Aldobrandini was elected pope, taking the name Clement VIII. His election was a significant victory for Ferdinando I de Medici and for the forces seeking to assert Italian independence against Spanish dominance in papal affairs. It demonstrated that even in an era of overwhelming Spanish power, a well-organized and determined Italian ruler, backed by considerable resources, could still shape the outcome of a papal election. Clement VIII's papacy proved to be long and effective. He pursued reforms within the church, ended the French wars of religion by reconciling King Henry IV to Catholicism, and fostered a period of relative peace and stability in Italy. He maintained a strong relationship with the Medici, recognizing their importance as a major Italian power. This papal connection further enhanced the Grand Duchy of Tuscany's international standing and solidified its position within the complex network of European states. The election of Clement VIII is a clear example of sophisticated Medici meddling. It was not about placing a family member on the throne, but about skillfully manipulating the political currents to ensure a favorable outcome for Florentine interests and Italian independence. Ferdinando I de Medici proved himself a master of papal diplomacy, leveraging his past experience and current power to influence the destiny of the church and secure the interests of his Grand Duchy. His strategic intervention ensured that the papacy remained a vital, albeit subtly influenced, partner for the Medici family's enduring power. Number 6. Pope Leo XI, 1605. The early 17th century saw the Medici family, now firmly established as the Grand Dukes of Tuscany, continue their strategic involvement in the affairs of the papacy. While their direct control over Florence was absolute, their influence in Rome remained a crucial element of their broader power. In 1605, the sudden death of Pope Clement VIII, a pontiff whose election Ferdinando I de Medici had heavily influenced, opened the door for another instance of Medici meddling. Ferdinando I, a Grand Duke whose political acumen was matched only by his ambition for his family, saw this as an opportunity to place a close relative on the papal throne. The candidate was Cardinal Alessandro Ottaviano de Medici, a distant cousin of the main Florentine branch, but still very much considered a Medici. Alessandro was a man of considerable experience, having served as a diplomat, ambassador to France, and a cardinal for many years. He was known for his piety and his diplomatic skills, making him a respectable choice. The College of Cardinals convened for the conclave in February 1605. The political landscape was still dominated by the rivalry between Spain and France, each vying for influence over the papacy. Ferdinando I de Medici, however, had cultivated strong ties with both powers, positioning himself as a powerful intermediary. He dispatched his most trusted agents to Rome, armed with detailed instructions and considerable financial resources. Their mission was clear: secure the election of Cardinal Alessandro de Medici. Ferdinando's strategy was meticulous. He knew the preferences and weaknesses of many cardinals. His agents engaged in intense lobbying, subtle persuasion, and strategic alliances. They highlighted Alessandro's long and distinguished career in the church, emphasizing his piety, his experience, and his ability to navigate the complex diplomatic challenges facing the papacy. They presented him as a unifying figure who could bring stability and peace to the Catholic world. The atmosphere inside the conclave was charged with political intrigue. Cardinals debated fiercely, votes were cast and recounted, and secret negotiations took place in hushed tones. The French faction under Cardinal François de Joyeuse saw Alessandro as a favorable candidate due to his past diplomatic service in France. The Spanish faction, initially hesitant, was eventually swayed by the Medici's persuasive arguments and the perceived neutrality of Alessandro. Ferdinando's agents skillfully played on the rivalries between the different national factions, positioning Alessandro as the optimal compromise candidate. The negotiations were not without their challenges. Some cardinals expressed reservations about Alessandro's age and health, fearing a short pontificate. However, Ferdinando's agents countered these concerns by emphasizing his vast experience and the potential for a swift, decisive election, avoiding a prolonged and contentious conclave. They also likely offered various inducements and promises of future favors to secure crucial votes. The Medici's vast wealth and network meant that they could back up their promises with concrete benefits. After a relatively short conclave lasting less than a month, the efforts bore fruit. On April 1st, 1605, Cardinal Alessandro Ottaviano de' Medici was elected Pope. He chose the name Leo XI, a symbolic nod to his illustrious kinsman, Leo X. The election was a significant triumph for Grand Duke Ferdinando I. It demonstrated his continued ability to exert direct influence over the papacy, once again placing a Medici on the throne of St. Peter. The celebrations in Florence and Rome were grand. For the Medici, this was another clear signal of their enduring power and prestige. However, the concerns about Leo XI's health proved tragically accurate. His papacy was remarkably brief. He fell ill almost immediately after his election, likely due to the rigors of the conclave and his pre-existing ailments. Leo XI ruled for only 27 days, earning him the nickname Pope of the Flash, or Papa Lampo. His pontificate was too short to enact any significant policies or reforms. He did manage to make a few appointments and issue some minor decrees, but his primary legacy became the brevity of his reign. Despite his short time on the throne, his election itself was a powerful statement of Medici influence. It showed that even after decades, the family could still command enough respect, wealth, and political leverage to steer the outcome of a papal election in their favor. The rapid succession of popes in 1605, Leo XI's successor would be elected within weeks, did not diminish the significance of the Medici's role in securing Leo XI's election. It was a direct, successful campaign to place a member of their extended family at the head of the church, reinforcing their status as one of Europe's preeminent dynasties, deeply intertwined with the highest echelons of power in both Florence and Rome. Their meddling continued, showing that even after direct Medici popes like Leo X and Clement VII, the family's ambition for ecclesiastical power remained undimmed. Number 7. Pope Urban VIII, 1623. By 1623, the Medici family's influence had evolved. They were no longer the sole power brokers in Florence, but the established Grand Dukes of Tuscany, a formidable presence in the Italian peninsula. The reigning Grand Duke was Ferdinando II de' Medici, a young ruler who inherited the complex network of alliances and ambitions cultivated by his predecessors. The European stage was increasingly volatile, with the 30 Years' War already underway, and the great powers of Spain, France, and the Holy Roman Empire locked in a desperate struggle for supremacy. The papacy, caught between these giants, sought to maintain its neutrality and spiritual authority, often with difficulty. When Pope Gregory XV died in July 1623, the College of Cardinals once again gathered for a conclave. The summer heat in Rome was stifling, making the already arduous process even more challenging. The cardinals were deeply divided, primarily between the pro-Spanish and pro-French factions. Each side pushed hard for a candidate who would serve their national interests. The Medici, as a powerful Italian family, sought a pontiff who would prioritize Italian stability and avoid becoming a pawn in the larger European power struggles. The Medici did not have a direct family member as a leading candidate in this conclave, but their influence was undeniable through strategic alliances and family connections. One prominent candidate was Cardinal Maffeo Barberini. The Barberini family was a powerful Roman noble house with deep ties to the Medici. Crucially, Maffeo Barberini's niece, Clarice Barberini, was married to Piero de Medici, a member of the Florentine ducal house. This marriage created a strong, direct familial link between the Barberini and the Medici, making Maffeo Barberini a highly favorable candidate for the Grand Duchy. The Grand Duke Ferdinando II de Medici, though young, was well versed in the intricate dance of papal politics. He deployed his diplomatic agents to Rome with clear instructions: promote Cardinal Barberini and counter any efforts by the Spanish faction to install an overly sympathetic pope. The Medici agents would have highlighted Barberini's intellectual prowess, his diplomatic experience. He had served as papal nuncio to France, and his reputation as a cultured and learned man. They would have stressed his ability to bring prestige and stability to the papacy. The conclave was characterized by intense lobbying, secret meetings, and constant shifts in allegiances. The oppressive heat took a toll on the cardinals, leading to illness and fatigue, which often hastened decisions. The Medici agents worked tirelessly, forming alliances with other Italian cardinals who also sought a less pro-Spanish pontiff. They utilized their financial resources to ensure loyalty and to subtly sway wavering votes, promising future favors and appointments. The Medici's reputation for patronage and their extensive network of influence meant their promises carried considerable weight. Cardinal Barberini was a strong contender. He had a reputation for eloquence and for being a skilled administrator. He was seen as a potential bridge between the various factions, capable of commanding respect from both the French and Italian contingents, while also being acceptable, albeit grudgingly, to the Spanish. The familial connection to the Medici likely added another layer of trust and reliability for many Italian cardinals. After a month of intense deliberations, on August 6, 1623, Cardinal Maffeo Barberini was elected pope. He took the name Urban VIII. His election was widely seen as a victory for the Italian cardinals, and for those who sought to maintain a degree of papal independence from the overwhelming influence of Spain. For the Medici, it was a triumph of their strategic meddling. While not a Medici by birth, Urban VIII was deeply connected to their family through marriage, ensuring that their interests would be protected and promoted at the highest levels of the church. And Urban VIII's pontificate proved to be one of the longest in papal history, lasting for 21 years. He was a highly cultured and ambitious pope, known for his lavish patronage of the arts and architecture, including the completion of St. Peter's Basilica. He also significantly advanced the fortunes of his own Barberini family, making them one of the most powerful and wealthy families in Rome, often in close alliance with the Medici. The close ties between the Medici and the Barberini families, through marriage and political cooperation, were evident throughout Urban VIII's long reign. And Urban VIII's election is a powerful example of the Medici's enduring influence, even as their direct role in Florence transformed from shadowy power brokers to established rulers. It demonstrated their ability to exert influence not just by installing a direct family member, but by strategically supporting a candidate with whom they had strong familial and political connections. Their consistent presence in papal elections, orchestrating outcomes that served their interests, cemented their legacy as the ultimate power players in Renaissance and Baroque Italy, always pulling strings, always meddling, and always shaping the destiny of the Holy See.